welcome Ali and Aliya to our show. We have a bunch of very interesting questions for you, but I would like to do a very small introduction about Ali and Aliya. Ali and Aliya are running the Ivy School in Karachi. Ivy, that's IVY. And I will let them tell you how it is very unique, how it is customized for the times. Um, and I would just like to, tell the viewers who are very interested to look up Ali and Aliya online because they have a great portfolio, which I cannot, go over and read out to you right now. But I believe that they are they're great academics to talk to because um, a lot of the academics we meet out in the world are not capable of having such entertaining conversations, creative conversations, open to experimentation and learning about how things work and how things can be done even better every day. That's something we really admire about Ali and Aliya. I'm going to go straight into the questions and we'll pick their brains as we go. So, Ali, I would ask you the first question, and that is there's a lot of talk about people transitioning online. Offices, work, everything is going online. E-commerce has picked up because shops are closed. In education, A-level schools, universities, they are going online because they have, older children who have laptops, they open them up. One of the struggles that we've had, and I can vouch for it personally with a 4-year-old of my own, is that younger children have a very hard time studying online, and schools are particularly struggling with taking that standardized curriculum and really putting it online and achieving those learning objectives. What do you have to say about primary school education and this big online transition under lockdown?
So, first to address the issue of A levels and the university, as in how well have they cope up in this time. And I had a chat earlier. I had a podcast with Dr. Faisal Bari, who's a professor at LUMS for economics and education. And we were asking him how he is coping up, and he's like, LUMS being a institution which has the resources and which is has the fundings and all, is was able to sort of bring its classes online. But what they also observed was that there are students who are basically in far-flung areas or where internet and other things are sort of patchy, or devices are not available. Those students had to struggle, and LUMS did help them, but the struggle was even found in the university. And secondly, he brought another issue, which was to do with like the quality of classes. I mean, right now we are teaching online. Right now we are we don't see children's faces anymore, and so while you are teaching, you don't know whether you're doing a good job or not. That has to be somehow now need to be understood. How effective are these online classes? Similarly, at CEDAR, we were able to do something similar, but we did not have those challenges, of course, because of the kind of student body we have. Of course, um, did not have those challenges. But there were other issues that I think were brought forward by our with our discussion with Dr. Bari. One of them was basically how this is the time when you are seeing themes like gender and other inequities sort of coming at the forefront. So, for example, a lot of female students at LUMS were finding it difficult to study at home because they were previously at dorms and now they're back at home, so they are being asked to do a lot of this domestic work which otherwise was not done by them, so they are basically finding it difficult to concentrate. Similarly, those students who are in a house room environment which isn't really conducive to learning, that is also being a challenge. Also, older kids were finding it difficult in the sense that parents right now were not really sort of accepting this idea of a child learning online or a student learning online. And so therefore, if a Zoom class is happening, they may walk in, they may ask you something, like it's funny moments that are happening all over the world, but
Mm.
it's true struggle for somebody who is now
Mm.
actually in a classroom, in a Zoom classroom. So and even like from a teacher perspective, I mean, when I'm about to conduct a class for my economics, I'm really careful about, like my dog's not being barking, kids away, like sound quality and all that. You don't want anyone to talk loudly so that when you're teaching a class, the background noise is. So this is a difficult environment, even in a setting where people have resources. Now we look at people who do not have resources, and I think that's where the challenge is pretty real and big. So for primary education, I want Aliya to sort of talk about it, because I think she's looking at things from a very close lens.
Mm-hmm.
So I would like to sort of focus on the part of the transition, the idea of transition when we talk about transition. So firstly, I think something important to be said here is that nobody is really prepared for something of this magnitude, right? And a lot of schools have contingency plans, but it is never something that expects your entire school system to shut down.
Absolutely.
And what I want to put out there is that a transition means that everybody is in a state of flux right now, and something that I was listening to the other day was this podcast about how organizations are reframing education, and they spoke about a framework that I want to tell you about, and it's called the Bowman and Deal framework. And both Bowman and Deal were HGSE, Harvard Graduate School of Education professors and researchers, and they gave this framework for when organizations are trying to bring change. So it talks about these 4 levels at which you implement change within the organization, and the first one is the structural level. So at the moment, if I think of schools as these organizations who are trying to implement change, so the first thing is structural in terms of trying to figure out timetables that work for different age groups, in terms of trying to figure out training needs for teachers, in terms of trying to figure out what kind of supports children need who have different learning needs, how to be inclusive in an online classroom, for instance. These are all issues and challenges that are going to come up in online education, because obviously nobody's really prepared things around this, or policies or frameworks around this. And then the second area after structural was the HR. And the HR part of leadership, the part of organizational change is basically staffing needs. Staffing needs have changed. In a physical classroom, for example, you may need 2 teachers. In a virtual classroom, you may just need 1. And then similarly,
And sort of also the HR would also require new kind of skills. So we were just discussing a little while ago of how all of us are now, who were previously probably camera shy, cannot be camera shy, because
Yeah.
as if I'm a teacher for early years, I need to be not camera shy, because now the part of my job that has changed is basically to be super engaging in front of a camera. And not of all of us have that talent, but you've got to have that talent. So the
yes,
HR needs have also transformed and need to transform basically with the new uh, learning outcomes.
and also then you have a political part of this 4-frame structure, and the political part talks about how governments and are creating policies that can support, let's say, online learning, or help schools transition to online learning. And that is something that I feel is very important right now. What kind of supports, what kind of reliable internet access are we providing, especially in far-flung areas? Like, what kind of tools are we providing for people to learn? Are they high-tech, low-tech, no-tech? Are they TV-based, radio-based? What kind of systems and supports are there provided by governments and policymakers. And then the final part of that four frame network is symbolism, and that comes down to your culture, your values as an organization, and how you want to bring those into play. So every school has a different ethos or philosophy, and how that incorporates into your online learning program, that is also important. That is something you have to maintain as a school.
And to add on to the symbolic part of it, I think we need to come up with new symbols of sorts, where we need to sort of redefine what become important in this time. For example, because like it's crisis learning, so we're looking at a new sort of organization sort of needs to be redefined. And when we look at symbolic part of things, which is probably one of the crucial parts, because suddenly the priority of an organization has to change, and while keeping the philosophy of the school. So from leaders perspective of institutions that we are taking care of, we are trying to make sure our philosophy does not change, yet at the same time define new symbols or simply which can basically help us go through these difficult times.
And so you spoke about how you have a young one at home as well, and how does that kind of tie up with online learning for younger kids, right? And in that case, I think that schools provide a lot to children that goes beyond teaching and learning. They're places where a lot of schools actually provide nutrition abroad. The children get food from school as well, and then they teach social emotional learning in terms of how students interact with each other, with adults, with their peers, etc. Those are programs that run through schools. And similarly, they teach civics and engagement and all these things that are not just your cut and dried teaching in academics. So that is something that I feel becomes important in an online environment. So if you're switching from a physical environment to an online environment, are you able, and how much are you able to carry these ideas forth into your curriculum? So this is what really sets you apart, and this is kind of what makes your online program.
True. So one thing you mentioned about structure made me think about things like the actual classroom. So for children, spaces, a classroom, their desk, their material, their resources, the ones they use, who they sit next to, even sensory things, how something smells, the light, all of those things really, really matter when they're that little for their development. And how do you think that is going to, how would we take that and sort of transform it for this new experience? Because there is something that I have noticed and also read about, is that children have a very different sort of response to screens. They can be glued to screens, but that necessarily doesn't mean you're getting through to the child each time. To them, it's still just a screen, and they can walk off because their sort of attention span is so limited. How does the classroom experience come online? Is that even possible?
So I think what you're talking about is what we, in education jargon call formative assessment. Like to see whether, like you're saying, if a child is glued, are they really understanding? That regular check for understanding that happens so often in a classroom, in a physical environment, where you can easily, notice if somebody is not tuned into the teacher, and you're like, oh, are you understanding? So that is something. I mean, like when we move towards online learning, something that I kept asking Ali was, Ali, how are we going to do formative assessment in an online classroom? And then we did a lot of research and a lot of things, and I figured out that it's actually not that challenging, but it just takes a little bit more effort on the part of the teacher to constantly be noticing which children are engaging more in the online classroom and which ones are not, and also to change the way they formatively assess. Like in a normal classroom, you may call on somebody to raise their hand or whatever, but in an online environment, you can have symbols or you can have maybe hand signals where children like, yes, I understood, no, I did not understand, so you can quickly pick up on who didn't. So these kind of strategies kind of become more useful in this kind of an environment.
That's
So that
interesting.
is that is one thing that I noticed. Also, you talk about how does the online classroom work for younger kids, right? Because I mean, there is a range of different age groups, a range of different home environments, a range of different abilities in a classroom. And each child brings with them something different to the class. And in a regular classroom, they kind of just come into a shell where they're there for the whole day, and the teacher is responsible in managing them and can provide them all the support they need.
Mm.
In an online classroom, that responsibility now is belonging to the parent, who is now becoming a sort of learning coach. So that person is a teaching assistant of sorts, who
Mm.
is listening to what the teacher is saying, ensuring that their child is comprehending it, ensuring that the child is able to complete an assignment and submit it. There's a very new role for parents here. And that is something I can talk to you more in detail about later. But then I just
Um,
want to quickly address all the things that you've asked.
yeah.
And
No,
I
so
think
it's actually
one
good.
thing
Yes, Ali, please go on.
So I think one thing is for sure that those a lot of sensory and other things we will not be able to replicate. So this is something that is forgiven, that this environment will not be 100% substitute
Mm.
to the online, will not be 100% substitute to physical sort of. So I think that is one thing we all need to agree, so that we could then start to sort of make this online experience richer. Because somehow or the other, if we are too fixated about what used to happen versus what is going to happen now, we will not be able to move forward. And that is a bigger challenge for all of us. I mean,
Absolutely.
as leaders, we trying to make sure that we tell our teachers, we tell our parents, we tell everyone that like everything is going to be redefined, and we need to be ready for change.
yeah.
Absolutely.
One
Absolutely.
thing that you mentioned about learning environments, about spaces. So I just recently like typed up a newsletter for our school about how they can make their learning space a really good home environment. So it basically, how you can have a nice environment at school, you can replicate something similar at home as well. And it really depends on how and how familiar you are with the child's school environment. And I think schools have a role to play here, because they can always reach out to parents and say that, we provide a flexible learning environment for our children. So like at our school, our furniture is modular, and we provide a flexible environment, which means that if children want to read a book, they can take their book, they can sit on the bean bag, or they can sit in another corner, they can sit on the floor, on the rug, anywhere they want. So that's a flexible environment. And our furniture is similarly modular. So if they want to do a whole group thing, they will push it together. If they want to do small groups, they will pull it apart. So in a home environment, what you can do is you can create a flexible modular space for your child. A space, maybe a table and a desk, but also a little rug space, a comfortable, maybe jumpy ball in case they want to sit on that and they want to get some energy out. You can have inspirational quotes on the wall. You
To make
can
it language rich
to
environment,
make it, yeah.
because the school is a language rich environment, and we may need to replicate something similar at home, which again is going to be a challenge for the parents.
Yes.
But that's something you need to do, because
Hmm.
if you want to sort of make the learning loss to not happen.
Yeah.
Agreed. This very naturally leads to the second question I was going to ask you, which is that at this time it is about, so as leaders of a school, we have to understand that the leaders of schools are educating parents. Parents don't know, or didn't even have any need to know, and had kind of outsourced this function of teaching children certain things. And even though we were always told as parents, and I'll say we because I have two children of my own, and I would like to think I'm an involved parent, but there is only a certain amount of involvement that was required of me previously. So I'm so used to it. Past 10 years or so, I've become so used to it. The pressure of actually quickly changing my role is tremendous with everything else going on. So there is a role that I look to for towards the school, and I feel that a school needs to tell me what to do next, how to fill these gaps, how to understand that there's a lot else. Like you mentioned, there are things in the house that can be done to replicate certain sort of experiences, and they're all linked to learning objectives, and they're all linked to ideas that are very deliberate, not just by chance happening in schools, right? So what do you think schools can do to educate parents across the board, all kinds of parents, without really pressurizing them or making it too technical, because so many of them are not naturally teachers or academics or even interested, or they even don't have the bandwidth to really do much right now. What can schools do to help out parents, and are they doing anything about it? Do you think, I'm sure you have laid out a number of things, but what do you think schools can do?
So I think, first of all, educating parents about what quality online learning looks like is very important. In that case, they would know that what to expect from such an environment. It's really important for them to understand expectations. So, for example, there are documents that lay out standards and best practices for quality online instruction, and sharing those kind of documents and showing parents or informing them how these best practices will be incorporated into the new learning environment gives them a sense of ease and peace that, okay, the school is working towards something, right? And apart from that, I think trying to engage them at a higher level, I mean, about how their child's learning is taking place on a daily basis. That is something that is very, very important right now. So a lot of things that are going to happen in a school, for especially for younger children, will be like the parents are going to maybe they should be provided advanced lesson plans or an idea of materials needed for a lesson, and then the parents can provide those materials in advance of the child coming into that class. Because for younger children, you do need that kind of support, which is usually done by teachers in a classroom. So the setup will now be done by the parents. So in terms of laying out the responsibilities and expectations, I think it's really going to help if schools have that kind of constant communication going on. And the structure of the curriculum should be such that it should provide the maximum support that the school can remotely provide. I think these things are very important.
What
And
do
to
you
add
mean
on,
by what do you mean by that, Aliya? If you could elaborate,
So
what's
let
the
me
structure of the curriculum that can help parents out?
Okay, so basically it depends on a lot of things. For example, if we have a collaborative and a discussion-based curriculum, which allows children to participate a lot in class. So one challenge that we were faced with when we were taking our curriculum online was how are our children going to have that same level of discussion in an online classroom? So we had to do a lot of research to look for apps and to look for ways to incorporate the same things in an online environment, which maintains the integrity of our curriculum. Similarly, if we're talking about things like social emotional learning on a daily basis, a teacher is able to talk to a child at any point in time. They are able to address a concern. They are able to meet an emotional need in the classroom immediately. In an online or in a remote environment, that then becomes difficult. You can't do it in real time. So what you need to do is that what we've done, for example, have set up connection sessions, daily, weekly connection sessions with children who need support.
Okay.
So they get an opportunity to engage one-on-one with the teacher and just talk about their personal well-being or any issues they're facing, anything they want to talk about. These are just, I've just given you two examples,
Yeah.
but these are basically the ways you have to change and incorporate things into your curriculum that you were doing before. Otherwise, your curriculum literally becomes a set of presentations and worksheets that are happening.
And I think also it's something you added or you asked before was about, parents with challenging schedules of their own. And that's why I think for us, we made sure that our online teaching has to be flexible, in the sense it can't be a whole the complete sort of replication of how it was happening before, like for example 8 to 1 or 8 to 2 or 8 to 3 kind of a school. It's not that. It's going to be something which allows flexibility. It's going to be something which allows children to revisit those lectures that they probably miss, or they probably are unable to attend, or they probably are unable to concentrate. So there has to be a lot of sort of recording, a lot of also parents, when they want to sort of revisit a concept, they should have that kind of a thing. So there is going to be a lot of back and forth communication that has to be happening. Also, we are mindful of one more thing, which is that when we go online in June, we want to make sure that we take it easy for the first few days, because there will be a learning curve. Parents will be learning how to make the work happen. Children will be learning how to concentrate. So we need to be, that's my advice to any school who's basically thinking of, get to know what your parents' schedules are, what kind of difficulty they're facing, have that channel of communication to be open, have that flexibility to be provided, so that they can get the work done and not be frustrated. Uh, and also then basically making sure that there are ample resources available later on as well, if the child is unable to sort of concentrate on a day, or was not being, the parent might not be around because of one reason or the other. So all of that has to be incorporated in some way or the other, which means flexibility has to be given to learners, to parents, and so on.
Yeah, and I think that is Ali saying a really important point, because I think in Pakistan, this is a little inflexible in terms of parents I know work very hard with their children, and there's a lot of pressure on them to meet certain standards, etc. But I think in the current environment, the fact that we have online learning as a support, as a school for children to actually attend classes and gain knowledge from all of that. So I think it's important that we understand that this may not be the ideal situation. It's not the best kind of education that we can give, but we can strive for the best with the resources we have and with the limitations we have.
I think that there is a lot of talk about how individual pathways are developed for each child and they learn at their own pace, and these were all just discussions a few months ago. But now with what has happened, there is a huge need to remain flexible and to be more benevolent with the overall approach as educators, in the sense that a lot of schools were sending in worksheets and were sending in, like you said, like a one way transmission of sorts, to talking at somebody and just throwing things out there, which those resources are actually available online for anyone to use. They're not actually customized or curated as such. But if we remain flexible, as people who are in the lead right now, if they remain flexible, what will happen is it will lead to a more project based approach. I think not the way project based as you do it in at the Ivy school, but project in the sense that as parents we would have a certain thing in mind, and we would know that okay, this is the learning objective for my child, and I can probably finish this by the end of June, because the material the school has provided me has clarified what it's about, where the child is supposed to go with it, and whether I take 2 weeks to do it or I do it in 2 months. I will make sure that that is done if the school has told me that that's one of the things they would have done under normal circumstances. And it's not going to disappear on, say, the 20th of June or something, so I have to scram and just get it done, because everybody will have an absolutely individualistic approach to this now. Like you said, home environments and parents and their schedules and all of that will come into place. So plus there's so many actual real emergencies. There are so many people who have people unwell in the house, elderly people, inabilities to visit hospitals. I mean, the entire ecosystem is so challenging. So the approach needs to maybe be generous and more sort of giving, even more
Yeah.
than it was before. Agreed.
Nagin, I have a view about this as well. I
All right.
think while the schools need to be generous, I think the reason why schools approach was very I mean, a lot of schools were also in a panic state because this is the first time they were going about it. And then came the challenge of, parents starting to question the need to sort of pay fee when
Absolutely.
the schools are. So their response was, rather than being well thought out, rather than being like, okay, this is what has happened, let's just go to drawing board and make a strategy. And it became a panic strategy because suddenly the parents started to put more pressure. And for schools like, for example, Ivy and so many other schools, which are new sort of businesses and all, for them, it's a very fine line. And so basically, financial pressure can lead, and this is happening with big schools even, because every school has a particular kind of sort of financial system which got broken or affected during this time. And they started sort of responding, because you have a large parent body which is suddenly unsatisfied and suddenly in a panic state, and you are also panicking, and you are trying to make sure that you give ample sort of work so that your sort of your effort is not questioned, and so on and so forth. But if we were looking at from a team perspective, from a collaborative perspective, we could have said, listen, this is what is happening, this is how we're going to go about it, this is the time you need to give us so that we devise a strategy for you. At the end of the day, we are a school you trust, and so we will make a strategy for you to which will be useful. Luckily, I would say this, and I want to sort of point out, like sometimes policies government make are have unintended consequences. One of the policy the government made was that they said April and May will be off. That actually provided a lot of the schools that I know, and us also, a lot of time to rethink, rework, sort of assemble together a very coherent online program, at least in our case.
Mm.
So that was an unintended consequence, because now when we're going in June, we're much more organized. Our teachers are trained, our teachers are ready, everyone is understanding the challenge and therefore embracing it, and be sort of ready for it.
Mm.
And that's why I think the reciprocal sort of generosity has to come from the parents in this time, because none of us would want as parents that there will be a learning loss. I mean, you said one thing which is an important thing, and Aliya and I were discussing this in the morning. There are children with different trajectories. For example, if let's say if I'm a child with learning disabilities, or if I'm a child with speech disabilities, or if I'm a child with different challenges now, and the school was providing me those services, and those services are very difficult to be replicated online. What will happen to those children then? Is that if this been sort of online classes or whatever will happen for, let's say, 2 years or I don't know, then we're looking at a huge generational learning loss that will happen unless we find ways to address it, which is which is as effective, or at least as effective as probably physical sort of classrooms.
Agreed. Ali, it's actually really good that you gave the other perspective, because one of the very sort of, aggressive conversations going on is also about school fee. And even though it wasn't, it's not officially something that, I had planned to talk about today, but since it's come up, that there is, I feel, an overall need for schools to speak up about their side of the story. There has been so much bashing almost, yeah, not to mention the fact that last year there was a whole sort of scheme going on to shut down schools in a certain strip in Defense and Clifton and this and that. It's that's been that started the conversation perhaps, and I think on that, and then there was a discussion around fee being reduced, and then the lockdown happened and the aggression was unbelievable. And because we were working closely with schools, we could see that both parties were struggling. Both parties were equally struggling. It was not, and so in Pakistan people view private schools as a money making business. There's a lot of bias about how education is no longer for its own sake, and it's for just a money making business. It's a machine. And I feel that that is probably because schools don't speak up. And do you agree that that's something that schools should talk about a lot more?
I mean, so the environment is pretty
I mean,
hostile for
sorry,
school.
sorry, just to sorry, I'm cutting in, but I also want you to maybe shed some light on the fact that it's not cheap to set up digital and online resources, train your teachers,
Yeah.
all of those things.
So,
So
so
we did have a few parents speak up about the fact that few friends around me from various schools who said that if the fee isn't reduced, why are they charging us for things like libraries and, like, sports and things, when the children aren't using them? And then I asked them if they're charging you for the digital learning platforms they've enabled for you this month, and they said no, they aren't. And I said that's probably where the money has been spent, right? At the end of the day, they are spending that money and not telling you, but they are. I mean, something was happening last month. How did that happen magically? So please shed light on that if you can.
So, I mean, the first thing is that the environment is pretty hostile for private schools. Aliya wrote an article about how there's a single narrative out there, which is where schools are exploitative and they are sharks who want to make money. And there is a one-way kind of relationship where they just want to make. I mean, we all know the contribution of private sector. I mean, I'm a beneficiary of private education. A teacher of economics, I understand it's a good which is merit in nature, which means it should be provided to everyone, which at an affordable price. This government has a role to play, but there's a long discussion that which I do not want to get into. But what I want to get into is this idea that why are schools not coming together and talking, is because when schools do talk about it, they are sort of put in a difficult situation. It's like when you speak, you are sort of highlighting yourself. So it's rather important to be quiet rather than raise a voice. Schools are coming together and they they went to the court and they tried to question that circular that came over 20%. And I think still a discussion happening on the court, because courts are agreeing with the school as to why the fee should not be reduced. It's kind of like a discriminatory thing, because you have so many other things happening. For example, you have other costs. Nobody is asked to reduce the price. So why schools? Are schools the only institutions that are being making excessive profits, or are there other places as well? I mean, why not go and ask your tailor who you are about to buy, or your car manufacturer? Ask for a 20% discount from that guy also. Ask for a 20% discount from the guy you buy grocery from. So that discussion somehow is sad from an education, from some people in education, because that means your country doesn't have the right priority. If education is something that you want to attack in the first go, then you are not going to see innovation to happen. You're not going to see people to put right kind of human capital to come into this market, because ultimately lower sort of
fees
fee
make lower salaries,
make lower salaries, make lower investment in different things and so on. So I think we need to sort of rethink about our priorities. There is a lot of investment that has been required in the last 2 months in terms of enabling teachers with the devices, enabling buying LMSs, training, and so on, which had to be done very quickly. And none of these schools, I'm hoping all of these schools that I'm working closely with, nobody is saying, we're not going to do it, because they know that this is now the thing that they need to invest upon. So the challenge was, of course, the money that is required to pay salaries, to pay rent. So, for example, if I was a policymaker, I would have said, you know what, schools, I will reduce your fee by 20%, but also pay your landlord 20% less, pay this guy 20% less. Like make a comprehensive policy which allows institutions to survive rather than close down. What is the economic impact of this kind of a policy? Is just that a lot of schools which are small or do not have deeper pockets will definitely close down. You are looking at a monopolization of education then. Some schools with strong deeper pockets, financial might may be able to stick around, and others may close down. Or schools who are around will cut down on R&D, research and development, on innovation and all that, ultimately affecting our sort of learners again.
And I also feel that I think I just like to add here that I think right now Pakistan is the only country maybe who is talking more about price controls and price of schools rather than the quality, because I think there should be a discussion around quality. I mean, if I'm a parent and I want to pay a good fee for getting a good education, and if my child does not get that good education, if there's a decline in the quality of what he is getting, I want to go up to that school and say, you know what, I don't think this is value for money. I don't think that you are providing a good quality education to my child. The conversation should be around quality.
Yeah.
Agreed.
And there's something economics in voting by feet. It's a very important concept, voting by feet, which is basically like as a consumer, if I'm buying education, I'm not happy with it, vote by feet by choosing another school. Move away from that school that is not providing. And that kind of a thing should be more of a discussion that could have happened. Like, for example, government focusing on price should focus on, okay, what quality or value are you going to provide? Policymakers should have asked all the schools, okay, what are the solutions that you are adopting? I think something which we also felt so strongly was that they should have said, private schools, why don't you help us and make solutions for even public schools?
Yeah.
Why don't you come together? Let's make a policy sort of panel, and let's go out and let's help each and every child that is out there. I mean, sadly, and this is a discussion that we had with Dr. Faisal Bari as well, he pointed out that our policies right now are very elitist as well, because we are not thinking about those 22 million children who are out there without a school, who are not going to school. We're not even thinking about those who are going to these schools which are not really good schools. All we think about is basically what these middle income or upper middle income or rich schools are paying to private schools. Maybe we need to have that kind of a dialogue that needs to happen in this time. There is nobody no. I mean, I'm in a group of with other schools as well. No one was reached by government about a solution that they have come up with for their school, which can be used by public schools, or nobody is asked for that kind of support. This is where I believe our policymakers need to focus. More collaboration. They should say, okay, this is a problem for the whole country, so let's come up with a solution which is good for the whole country, and rather than looking at price control.
There is just one last question that I'd like to ask you, and you kind of touched upon it. Private schools helping out the rest of the country with with this scenario? Best practices that they could maybe easily pick up. Are they doing them? Can they do them? Do you have any suggestions about that? That pretty
So,
much.
yeah, so basically, I think one thing we're talking about is the education response of the government to the COVID crisis, right? And there's been a lot of work on this. If you go to UNESCO and check it out, and how many different countries and how they've responded. And within those countries, there are all sorts of countries. There are developing countries and developed countries, and those with limited resources and those with not. And I think what they've done is they've been very creative in finding solutions that can reach a large number of people, a large number of children. So what some countries have done is that they have created national repositories of material for different age groups and different grades. And these national repositories, this material is available to teachers within the state. So all the teachers are able to access that and use it to teach online. So that is one solution that I thought is something we can do as well, because it increases the outreach um, to different areas of the city and of the country. And then another thing I saw was TV based and radio based solutions, because obviously we are a country that does not have a very high tech outreach to everybody. So we have to find solutions that are low tech and no tech as well. So TV based and radio based solutions are those ones. And what we can do there is that we can provide programs on radio, and we can provide programs on education to children for different levels. And I know there is a TV program that has been initiated by the government, but honestly, I mean, Ali and I have been looking at it, and I think it does leave room for improvement, and it does leave a little bit to be desired in terms of the quality of what is being put up there. And that is where private schools and private organizations can play a very important role, because the issue, when it becomes an issue of quality, I think they are best positioned to bring out solutions that can actually be of good use for children all over. So I think that is one thing. Also, public-private partnerships, being able to do online partnerships with organizations should help in formulating curriculums, in providing support, I mean, I actually would look at this as a kind of opportunity. Right now, we're on a level playing field, and we have anybody who comes up with a good online solution is somebody who can then implement that solution for their own schools as well as for the country. We're really, I think of it as an opportunity. The one thing that is lacking here is that the government can support or facilitate these programs by providing, bringing together groups of different sector specialists, such as the tech industry, the internet providers, the telecom providers. If we bring all of them on board, along with good private school educators, and they can formulate a program that can reach out to different people, I think that is one way we can democratize, or we can increase outreach for the rest of the country as well.
That's great. That's a great point, Aliya. Tell me something. There's going to be people debating the quality angle that you've just brought up, because a lot of people feel that there's a mindset something is better than nothing, and that the fact that in a country with in impoverished and a really dire situation in terms of education, with ghost schools and children out of schools and all of those things, um, a lot of people may say that this is an elitist approach to the whole education angle. Is it that you're asking for too much, that you're emphasizing on quality, where even basic literacy like reading and writing to get by in life, that's actually something people need for survival, right? And that's something that I feel a lot. There's a big disconnect, and people are working on this disconnect in the country. But I feel like there's a lot of research that you do as the Ivy school, and I believe in Ivy Ed Talks. You talk about, you talk to experts about various, angles and the micro and the macro of it. Um, are there countries in the world which are taking this, um, taking the same problem and coming up with maybe creative solutions to it? The fact that just because you have a very big vacuum doesn't mean the quality has to be compromised. Have you come across any such example which maybe Pakistan could follow overall for this democracy, topic we're talking about?
For online, are you talking about for online learning?
Well, for now, yes, it is for online learning, but
You're
as
talking
a
about the
general,
current situation, right? So
yeah.
basically, yes, I read up on a lot of reports for how different countries are responding, and that includes your Middle Eastern countries. I think they've been doing a lot of work on this. A lot of reports on that, and it includes the number of things that I mentioned earlier, like creating national repositories, having TV-based education, having radio-based education, of a certain minimum quality standard, because we have to understand one thing: you cannot provide mass scale programs of low quality because they are not serving anyone.
And
So,
that money will be spent and not effectively something which we, I mean, while we say yes, we can't choose, but we need to make sure that quality has to be maintained. And I think even with the program that Aliya pointed out, the quality can be improved. There are
Yeah.
resources being spent, so why not just work on improving the quality?
Yeah, I think it's not
spend
just.
a lot of money. I think for getting quality input, I don't think you need to spend a lot of money. There are people who will volunteer their services.
Absolutely.
I am telling you firsthand that there are people who will volunteer and say, you need people who have knowledge of education.
Yeah.
Let me help.
So it's more a matter of prioritizing quality. It's not that hard to actually achieve. It's just that nobody.
Yeah,
there's
I
no
don't
need
think
to
I don't think
compromise it.
they will be. Yeah, they will. I mean, it's not about more resources will be spent if you start to
Yeah.
improve it. I think sadly, a country like Pakistan, program evaluation do not happen where when you roll out a program and you evaluate, okay, what's the efficacy of that program? It doesn't happen. We don't do that kind of thing because mostly it's all politically sort of driven. What we need to do basically right now is not just say that there is this TV program, whatever, and that will be sufficient to provide the educational gap. That
Yeah.
isn't going to be, especially when the quality is questionable.
Yeah.
Do you feel that one of the things different between us and some more progressive countries is that we don't go for this more iterative approach towards these things? We don't take feedback from people, and we don't believe in the back and forth, that we kind of make a finished product and just impose it. Do you think that's something that is lacking in us?
I don't know, but I don't know whether it's just a cultural problem
Yeah.
or it's a problem of egos. I don't know, but
those are important
somehow,
to
yes,
talk about, right? I mean, that is something to start talking about if we want the real change to come up. I mean, at so many levels.
in our school, Aliya would talk about this. In our school, we have this whole philosophy of iteration.
Yeah. So I think one thing that we're trying to build through our project-based approach to learning is getting children to understand that you don't really produce the best quality work in the first go. It doesn't really happen immediately, but it takes a process of iterations and revisions and feedback and critique, which you should be really okay and positive with taking, because it is the critique that will actually at the end of the day improve what you have made. And I think
even in writing, we have a draft systems. We have multiple drafts of writing, which is basically the
process approach
to writing, which is you keep on getting feedback, you keep on revising your draft, and ultimately you will have a draft which you will be completely proud of.
Yeah, and I wish we could have a process approach as a country. If we could understand that, it's okay. Let's say if we are producing a program that is a national repository, or if you're producing a TV-based program or a radio-based program, I wish we could understand that, okay, it won't be perfect in the first go, but let's work on the quality to improve it and produce a product that is actually viable and workable for a lot of people. I think it's important
Agreed.
to
Agreed. I think our hope, one of the things we can hope for is that children from your school will grow up and change the system in the next few decades.
Inshallah.
But thank you so much, Ali and Aliya. It was wonderful talking to you. We're going to have more of these conversations as we go. But this was Mike's on and Ali and Aliya from the Ivy School. Thank you so much for being here, and
Thanks a lot.
a very happy birthday to you, Ali.
Thank you.
Thank you, Nagin. Thank you so much.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.